I often joke that the cows are far easier than the ranchers sometimes to train. They learn to stay within the virtual fences almost immediately.
Today, we're taking the next step in our conversation on virtual fencing. We started last week in that with Theo Beaumont of Halter and Dallas Mount with Ranch Management Consultants. Today, though, we're going to move past the basics and in part 2, dig into real-world challenges, training, terrain, and what ranchers can legitimately expect once the collars go on.
There are a lot of examples in tough terrain where it might not be as hard as you think. The towers don't have to be able to see the collars.
Then we're going to look at where the economics really start to matter, not just in saving time or reducing fence work, but whether this technology can actually improve the performance of your ranch.
I think on this place I'm managing, a really low bar would be a 20% improvement in the carrying capacity of that property.
We're asking the question, is virtual fencing a fit for your ranch operation? It's part 2 today on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Hi, everyone. Justin Mills, your host of the Working Ranch Radio Show, and we welcome you here to today's program. A lot that we're going to be talking about here. As you heard there in the opening, we'll get to that in just a moment. But before we do that, if you missed something, you want to go back and listen to it again or send a link to somebody to listen to the show, you can go to our podcast site at workingranchradio.com, or if you have your own preferred podcast provider, you can do it there as well. Hey, real quick, the latest issue of Working Ranch Magazine came in my mailbox this week. I don't know about you, but did you have a chance to glance through it? As always, full of a lot of great stories and articles that are extremely valuable and relevant for those of us in the ranching business. In fact, one that caught my eye because it's something, how many of you thought about putting a set of scales in your cattle working facilities? Well, Addie Brown, under the That's Improvement section of the latest issue, goes through the 3 different sets of scales. One's from Rice Lake, one from Cardinal Scales, and then also one from Sooner Scales. Take a look, read for yourself, kind of give you a leg up on that discussion if you're looking to head down that road. Also, it is the time of the year where we do see a lot of bull sales taking place. There's been a few already happening, a few more still going to be happening here in the next several weeks. And if you want a good list of some of those reputable breeders that are having sales, take a look in the Working Ranch Magazine. There's a list as well as several of them that do have ads in there. In fact, I do want to point out TK Angus, their ad on page 95. We're going to be talking here today later on in the show with Tim and Rick Marlette of TK Angus. They're out of Valentine, Nebraska. So be sure to tune in later on that. Now, speaking of Working Ranch Magazine, if you don't have a subscription, you can go to the website at workingranchmag.com, or you can also stop by your local tractor supply store and pick one right up there off the shelf and do it from that point. And a shout out here today to the Tractor Supply Store in Lodi, California, in Medina, New York, in Middlefield, Ohio, and in Mustang, Oklahoma. Well, as I said, we're going to be talking with TK Angus here later on in the show. Also, meteorologist Don Day will be in as we'll take a look at our long-range weather. But we continue here today with part 2 of what we started last week as we were going down the road of looking at virtual fence. And the interview ended up being quite a bit longer than what I had anticipated, and I didn't really want to cut anything out, which is why we spread it over 2 weeks. Last week, we started breaking down what virtual fencing actually looks like on a working ranch. Theo Beaumont from Halter walked us through the basics of that, how the collars work, how animals respond to it, and why the value isn't just in replacing fence, but more in gaining flexibility and the control of grazing. Also, we had Dallas Mount, who joined the conversation to put into the ranch management context, talking about how tools like this can change the way we think about labor, our stock flow, and using our land more intentionally. And together, we were able, with both of those folks in on the show, set a foundation for understanding where virtual fencing might make sense and what questions producers should be asking. So we're going to take part 2 of that conversation today. We're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we'll join in on part 2 of that discussion on virtual fencing with Theo Beaumont of Halter and Dallas Mount of Ranch Management Consultants.
It all starts with a tag. Identifying each animal allows you to better manage the entire herd and control your operation's future. For nearly 70 years, producers have chosen Allflex for individual animal management. With Allflex, you get the most trusted portfolio of ID solutions. Whether you need stock or custom visual tags, electronic tags, tissue sampling units for DNA collection, or syringes, Bring the All-Flex advantage to your operation today. Visit allflexusa.com to learn more.
Calving season is a favorite time of year, but along with that special time are dangers, extra stress, and increased labor. Safety Zone calf catchers are all about safety and making processing new calves easier. Designed for ATVs or UTVs, one person can do the job and never be threatened by the protective mother cow. Make this and every calving season safer and easier with a Safety Zone calf catcher. Watch videos and customer testimonials or order yours today at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914. Affordable and made in the USA. Make your upcoming and all future calving seasons safer, easier, and stress-free. Durable and designed to work anywhere you can drive your ATV or UTV. Order online at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914 today.
As we continue on now, Theo Beaumont, who is the head of partnerships with Halter, is our guest here today. Also joining us on the side, Dallas Mount, CEO and owner of Ranch Management Consultants. Again, thanks, guys, for being here on our program here today as we're discussing virtual fencing in general. And Theo, let's continue on down my line of questioning as a rancher. Back to you in this. And, you know, as I had said earlier, one of the reasons that ranchers feel a little bit cautious about accepting and going into change is the riskiness of it. And am I going to do this investment? How long is it good for? All those kinds of things. And that was kind of one of the things that I came up with. Now, I realize the type of service that it is, and we'll get into that when we start talking some costs and that conversation that we'll have next in this. But as far as making that investment, how long is it good for? I mean, if I'm going to do this, I want to know that it's not like a 1 or 2 year kind of a deal. And I think that's my concern a little bit.
I think it's valid, and we certainly get that a lot. Given that we're fairly new in the US, we have about 200 ranches live now across 22 states in the West, which is fantastic. But in the grand scheme of things, fairly new. And we're a company from New Zealand originally that are fresh into this market. So I think it's twofold. I really encourage people to ask those questions and concerns. We are not shy talking around the company goals, what we're planning over the next few years, what it's taken to get here. We are very much in this for the long haul. Halter has one product and one product only, and that is collars for cows. We're not trying to do anything else. We're laser focused on one goal, and we are very dedicated to making that happen. And I think the best way for ranchers to get confidence in that space, get one of the team out to visit you. We love coming up driveways. We have over 50 people on the ground in the US because getting out to see you in person is our absolute default. Ask the questions, figure out who we are, get to know us, invest that time, and we'll invest it in you. And at the end of the day, if it turns out it's a tool that isn't the right fit for you, fantastic. At least we've all learned something new. We've had a good conversation. And so I think it's a really important process that ranchers should go through if they are looking at technology like this. Yeah.
All right, we're going to get to costs in just a moment here, but before we get to that, I want to ask just in regard to the type of technology that this is and physically, kind of getting back to maybe an extension of our last segment of really how it works. As you said, you described the product itself. Let's describe the equipment. I mean, I know we got the collar. What else is equipment-wise that we're talking about when we look at something, especially like with Halter? And I know this is where some variations could happen between some of the different types of virtual fence companies. So let's hit that if we can real quick.
For sure. So for someone to have Halter on their ranch, they're essentially going to have three things. They're going to have the collars on their cows. They're going to have some base stations or some towers around their property. They're also solar powered, so you just set and forget them. And then you're going to have an app on your phone. Those three things, you're good to go with Halter.
Okay. If you're in the flat country, everybody's like, okay, I get this. All right. Next question. I know you get it. What about the folks that are in rough country? I've got two places. I've got one that's flat and I can not quite see from one side to the other, but it's pretty flat. And then we've got another ranch up in the Black Hills of Wyoming, and you don't see from one end to the other. And so how do you handle the terrain elements that are part of this?
Yeah, that's a very fair question, and we get it a lot. Look, the more mountainous, tougher terrain certainly makes it harder. We have a massive split of both. I think across Colorado, Wyoming, there's close to 60 ranches with Halter. The vast majority of them are in some properly gnarly country. And so I think it's a little bit how long is a piece of string, because your towers are obviously going to be more efficient on big, flat, open plains country. Having said that, there are a lot of examples in tough terrain where it might not be as hard as you think. The towers don't have to be able to see the collars. Okay, we just have to be able to shoot that essentially radio coverage across that landscape. So sometimes you'd be amazed how a good high point in a valley looking up draws actually can make terrain easier than you'd think. We just have to take a much more careful look at it on a really individual basis, as opposed to a 40,000 acre flat ranch. It's pretty easy just to estimate exactly how that sits.
Yeah. Theo, on those towers that are up, and I guess you could probably go either way. You probably see them where they're permanent. Do you see them where folks, like in a situation that is a lot of terrain maybe, or I guess it'd be in any situation, where they're movable?
We actually don't see the movable component. And there's a few really good reasons for this. Everyone asks about it, and believe you me, we have thought about it a lot. Okay. And if it made sense, we would absolutely have done it. I guess the short answer is we achieve 100% coverage over a ranch, okay? There's no dead spots. There's no areas where your cows just disappear. To achieve that, we never want a rancher guessing as to where there's coverage, because there's a lot of flow-on implications down the line. So yes, it might mean, we need to invest a little bit of extra money into one of these towers. But in terms of what that enables you to do from a product perspective and the usability side of things, absolutely is worth staying firm on that direction.
Okay. All right. Theo, is there anything that I didn't hit that you normally get asked on just how it works?
No, I mean, typically people ask, how many cows does it work on? How easy is the app to use? I often joke that the cows are far easier than the ranchers sometimes to train. And a lot of people ask how long it takes the cows to train. Answer is typically about a week, maybe 10 days. Mm-hmm. They learn to stay within the virtual fences almost immediately. It's kind of frightening how quickly they figure that out. The only piece that takes a little bit longer is the shifting, the movement piece. Mm-hmm. That can probably take another week on top of that. But we customize a training program to fit each individual ranch. It's not a one size fits all blanket approach. We really work with the rancher to figure out what's going to work best for them and their cows and how it aligns with their current sort of management strategies.
Okay.
What's the loss rate, the failure rate on the collars? How many cows do they fall off of typically?
Super low, fortunately. The collars, we want them nice and snug around the cows. Now, having said that, if you're in a really thick timber country, you're going to get a few falling off, no doubt. If I was just chatting to one of our ranchers the other day down in Texas, they're in incredibly thick mesquite country. You can barely walk through it. I think they've had 800 collars on for about a year now. And I think they've had about 20 come off over that time, which given the country, we're actually pretty happy. The most important thing is, can you find them when they've come off? Yeah. And that's where that accuracy piece is so important. You see yourself as a little blue dot, you see the collar and the app of your phone, walk right to it. That's where the light can sometimes be pretty handy as well. So it's pretty rare that we hear of ranchers having the occasional collar come off, but then not being able to find it. It will happen every now and then, but pretty rare in the grand scheme of things.
So then let's get to the next conversation, and that's going to be, an investment. What kind of investment are we looking at for this? Because then Dallas, I'll have you chime in at the end of this as we kind of put the economics to this. But Theo, you first.
Yeah, I like how you use the word investment, because I truly think this is an investment in your system and the way you are able to make a management change within it. So I think it's definitely the right way to think about it. We work in a subscription model. So I guess the easiest way to explain it is, Justin, imagine you had 200 cows, right? And you said, Theo, I'd love halter. Can I please have 200 collars? That's great. We give you the collars. They're yours. You own them. You don't need to purchase them outright. Then you're going to pay an annual subscription, which is $72 per year per collar. You're locked in for 3 years. There's a lifetime warranty on the collar. So if one ever goes wrong, great, that's halter's problem. They have about a 5-year lifespan. So at the end of that 5 years, if you need new hardware, we send you new collars. You don't need to buy them. You just keep paying that annual subscription. So definitely think about it as an OPEX, which is really important when we're thinking about that return on investment. You're also going to have a one-off payment for the base stations, and the base stations are $4,500 per base station.
Okay. All right. So Dallas, you said you did some back of the envelope economics in some of this. Your thoughts as you go through this from your standpoint?
Sure. Yeah. No, I'll draw on our grazing operation that we run and just do some numbers on what would it be, how much would the investment be, and what would be the return on that. So let's say if I was able, I'm gonna use a 300 cow example ranch just to make the math a little bit easier here. If I think about what we pay in time for fence maintenance, internal fence maintenance, and then annual infrastructure keep up on that, I'm probably still going to keep my perimeters fence up to be a good neighbor. If I didn't do that, right? My neighbors probably wouldn't talk very well about me. So I'm not going to eliminate all that, but I'm going to knock a big chunk of that out without having to do all the internal fences. So let's say I had an annual reduction of $10,000 in like contract labor I was paying for fencing on that, right? Let's say I knocked $5,000 out of my annual ranch fence maintenance budget. Okay, now these numbers might not be appropriate for your place. I'm just throwing these out as ones I think might be in the ballpark. That's $15,000 a year. That's not going to cover, that's $50 a cow. That's not going to cover the cost of the collar. Okay. So I got to do better than that to make this thing work. Where I really think about this and get excited, and especially on our more extensive grazing operation that's up 40 miles of dirt road, takes an hour to get there, right? There's a lot of that country that's not very well grazed, that's steep, that the animals don't like to use. We're operating all off of live water up there. So any areas that we have live water get really hammered. And some of those areas where we don't have that live water don't hardly see a hoof of a livestock. They might see elk and deer. But so let's say I had a unlimited fencing budget like what Theo started with. Let's say I could manage that place in the sky's the limit. What could I do from a grazing management part on that? And that's really where I think bringing it back to understanding the grazing management principles, right? And about how recovery makes plants healthier, how when animals are there, I want as many animals as I can get for a shorter period of time. And then balancing that with stockmanship, balancing that with matching carrying capacity and stocking rate. Okay, what could I do from this? So I think on this place I'm managing, a really low bar would be a 20% improvement in the carrying capacity of that property, right? I would think if I had this tool or some other tool like it in place, that would be easily achievable with just getting those animals to places where they don't normally get. Okay. So here's the next piece of that is I need to know what my gross margin is per cow. When I'm doing this, right? If I've got cattle that have a terrible gross margin, the economics are not going to work. Okay. If I've got cattle that have a strong gross margin, which is not very hard to do right now in today's cattle prices, let me average this out. If I ran a 5-year average gross margin on an average set of cows, I would typically probably see about a $500 gross margin per cow if we were working that out. So if I had a 20% improvement in my annual carrying capacity on 300 cows, that's another 60 cows.
Okay.
If I have a $500 gross margin on those cows, that's going to put $30,000 of total gross margin to service overheads. Now it's working. So those reduction in costs on the labor infrastructure side, those help. Those probably aren't where it gets exciting. Where it gets exciting would be improving carrying capacity with animals that have a strong gross margin. Okay. So I want to caution that because a lot of people don't know what their gross margin is, right? If you expanding an enterprise of a gross margin that sucks, you're going to go broke fast, right? So you got to have some principles to apply to this before you just start throwing technology out there, right? So that'd be my thing is understand how the grazing principles work, understand rest recovery, understand matching supply and demand, carrying capacity, stocking rate, then know your gross margins, and then the technology. Man, that's pretty cool. We can see on those things from an economic standpoint, as long as those foundations are right.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, guys, let's take a quick break. I want to come back for one more segment as we'll just package this whole conversation up if we can when we come back here. All right? In a world of variables that are beyond our control, there's a tool that can provide certainty for your breeding program. I'm talking about Igenity Beef. It's the first genomic profile designed for crossbred commercial cattle. Now, here's a tool that's going to utilize DNA to rank the genetic merit for 17 key traits, from maternal to performance to carcass traits, as well as mitigate risk factors, for example, like congestive heart failure. It's time to take the gamble and the waiting game out of your breeding program. Make accurate decisions with confidence and uncover your herd's potential with Igenity Beef. To learn more, contact your Neogen representative today or visit neogen.com/Igenity-beef. Well, guys, so far it's just been a great conversation. We can go on, and I know, Theo, as we were talking off air here a little bit, some of these questions, I mean, it requires almost a 3-hour conversation to get through some of this if you're going to sit across the table from some folks. But I hope we've touched on some things that I think that we'll get there. back to some real basics on this. And I know Dallas was talking a little bit about the economics of things and looking at this from his perspective and what they're looking at on his ranching operation. One of the things you held a thumbs up, and not everybody can see the video, is, I mean, we still got to have some pretty solid perimeter fencing. That's going to be one of the things that we still need to have. We're not going to get away from like, okay, we can just tear all the fences out of the whole outfit and here we go. You know, I mean, that's kind of some basics in some of this, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, please, please, please leave your boundary fences in. You can reinforce them with halter, go for it. But we definitely want to make sure that you still get your boundaries in.
Yeah. The second question real quick is, I think anytime, and this was even came up, I spoke recently at a Wyoming Women in Ag conference, and anytime somebody buys and does these kind of things, they wonder, well, how good's the support in this? Am I just going to be left out here hanging, or are they just going to take my money and run? How's this work? From the support side of things, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll take this first because it's one of the areas I love talking about most, because we're really proud of how it sits. It's always been a priority for us as a company, and will continue to be so. That hasn't changed as we've got bigger. Fundamentally, I think it helps when the vast majority of people in the company, and there's about 300 of us, are from an ag background. I think as a baseline, that is good. It's just basic things like, we know ranchers don't stop on Friday at 5 o'clock. Like, it could be any time, day of night, any day of the year. We have to be there. So there's two layers of support, essentially, for those listening. Every ranch will have an account manager. That's their person. They will be within the state. They live in the state where they are. They're the ones who have gone through the sales process with them, helping them get deployed, set up, collared, training plans, that whole side of things. And that's like their go-to person who they might call for like high-level things. They'll come and visit them at least once a quarter. They get to know them pretty well. Twofold to that is our support team. Now, we have support teams based in NZ, Australia, and the US, and this crew are the most important by a mile. They're the ones who are there to pick up your inquiry within minutes. So essentially, within the app on your phone, you can put a message into the support team. Now, people listening might be like, oh, I hate bots. I just want to call and speak to someone. And you can if you want to. The reason it works so well with Halter is if you put a message into support and you can see the people who are online, and let's say Rhett puts it up, who's one of the guys here in the Colorado office, instead of over the phone, him trying to interpret what you're saying and imagining what's going on, he can open up your ranch. He can see exactly what's going on his device. He can help you live right then, there in person to actually make those changes, whatever it might be. And it's hard to express what a game changer that is from a support side of things, because we can actually see what's going on. We're not trying to imagine. The best way for ranchers to learn about how good our support is speak to any one of our ranchers. And I would almost guarantee it's the first thing that comes up. We're really proud of it. I hope everyone listening, if they ever do get Halter, hold us to a very high account on this. It's something we continue to be absolutely leading on forever and always.
Yeah. We've given folks a lot to think about in this. I think it's been good because they've heard just, really firsthand physically how this works. So as a rancher evaluating, is this for me or not? That's my question, Theo. How do you work through that? Because I think I've heard you say too, that this may not be for everyone. We're not sitting here saying that it's the silver bullet in the whole deal, but it's a great tool. It has some applicability. How do you work through that question of, is this for me or not?
I think it's a really, really important question. And I think it's true. I don't think Halter's a silver bullet. I don't think it's right for every ranch. I think it's a tool. A tool is only as good as the people who are using it and the plan of how you're going to use it. So my biggest recommendation to anyone listening is take the time to have one of our team come out to see you. They're very friendly, I promise. Their job is to come listen and learn about your operation. Really break down together what you're trying to achieve at a high level, what's stopping you from getting there, and then just figure out together, okay, does Halter tick any of these boxes? It might tick some, it might tick none. That's fine. Then you can actually work, okay, what would this look like 365 days a year, practically on the ground? How would it work? Then you morph into, okay, what might the return on investment look like? Fantastic. And I think it is really important to invest the time to do that. And as I said earlier, like if you take that time and you figure out it's not the right tool, I guarantee we will have learned something or brought up some really important ideas around what the future might look like for the ranch. And I think finally, we love when people involve other parties as well. Like we launched our ranch management resource program recently, which gives all of our active customers the ability to seek out education. Rancher Profit's one of those courses, and Halter will invest in that education for ranchers to make sure that they feel really well supported going forwards, and they have the education and expert knowledge to go alongside a tool to enable them to execute on what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Recently, as I had mentioned, I had presented at a conference, and one of the questions that I asked the folks that are attending there is, what limits your growth? And I asked them, would more cows do it? Would more equipment do it? Would more land do it? Would more labor do it? When I asked about land and equipment and cows, it was kind of a definite no. When I asked labor, yeah, you could kind of see, but they also knew that labor is going to cost. Labor's not free. And then I asked about more money, and that was kind of a joke because everybody said, yeah, we could always use more money, right, in a way. And then the last question was, could you use more time? And it was a resounding everybody's head. And it was almost like a breath went out of the room. Like everybody's, yes, I could use more time. Dallas, I'm going to go to you on this, rancher to rancher. And I know you're also a consultant with a lot of other ranchers as well. When we start looking at this technology that's in our industry, and of course, virtual fencing being one of those, this has to be one of the things that really is part of that beyond the dollar sign, ROI, mental health, the ability to step away, as we were talking about before. Rancher to rancher, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Justin. As you were asking Theo, who's the person that's right to adopt this, right? I'm thinking about our clients in our network. We have probably a dozen or more clients that have used this or other technologies similar. The ones that are doing it successfully, I would say they have somebody on their team who's excited about this, right? It's not us pushing something onto people who are like, well, gee, I don't want to change anything. No, it's somebody going, man, I see the potential that something like this could do for my place, and I want to be the one to lead it. And then the leadership of that ranch has given them the autonomy and the ability to do that well. I think it's a ranch that understands principles, that understands these underlying principles, that is looking into their situation, looking into their numbers, knowing how to apply it in a thoughtful way. And a lot of these technologies in agriculture are not going to fix a broken business. Right. So we've got to be able to have a strong foundational business that's applying these things. Justin, the point on time, I think it's a great point, but what am I going to do with that time? Yeah. How am I going to redeploy that? I'd hate to see somebody save time from, okay, now I'm not going up there and unrolling polywire, but now I'm wasting that time on other stupid stuff we do on the ranch, right? So let's redeploy that time into things that actually create value for our lives, for our businesses. Maybe it's having more flex time in the day where I can just enjoy. I can go to my kids' ball games, right? I can take a vacation with the family. Maybe it's, sitting on the porch drinking coffee longer in the morning, right? And just thinking about what the day is going to bring and not being so rushed. But a lot of times I see farmers and ranchers that save time, but then just redeploy that time into other low-paying things that are just keeping us busy, right? And that's not what we want to do. We want to be thoughtful about deploying that into things that actually move the needle. Yeah.
Theo, I guess some final comments from you in our conversation here today. I appreciate the in-depth conversation that we had about the technology as a whole, about your particular technology with Halter. And as we leave this out, just some final comments, maybe some things I didn't ask you that you need to hit on, anything like that.
We get a lot of questions. It can be minor stuff like, how long does it take to put a collar on? So we work at like 45 seconds per head. The support we covered, which is good. We get lots of questions around like where the technology is going. And to that, I usually talk a bit about where we've come from. I can confirm that the product we have now versus what we had even just a few years ago is so different. It's hard to even put into words. And I think that gives people a lot of confidence around where it's going in the future. It's certainly a fun topic to talk about. We have no plans to slow down in any area of the business, but I think, it's going to really set up our ranches to succeed going forwards.
Yeah. Real quick, and not to go back into another conversation about the service, but with the subscription type basis that you are, that lends itself to, if I'm making that investment being subscription based, as you guys make changes, I get those changes as well. Is that kind of, am I right in assuming that?
You're actually spot on, and I should have mentioned this. The collars are updatable in the field, so just how your phone updates and new stuff appears, the collar's identical. So as we continue to add features, make changes, make things better, those collars will be updating in the background overnight So ranchers will always have the latest and best of what we can provide. We don't have to bring them in and give them new collars. I think that updatable component is one of the biggest reasons that Halter is here, is because, yes, we make mistakes and we see areas to improve and we get feedback on areas that we could improve, but then we can actually action it and we can make a change, and we get past this constant frustration in ag is that you buy something or invest in something and then 3 years later you're out of date, which makes it really hard to decide when is the right time to hop on the bus, because it's like, I just wait one more year and then a new model will come out. So the updatable component really mitigates that concern, which I think is super important. Great question.
Yeah. Dallas, I want to go to you here for our final question. And I know, Theo, you were kind of our main interviewer here today, and I don't mean to leave you here not being the last person to get asked a question, but it's kind of like I want to slam the door and kind of close the door, and for Dallas and I to go into a side room and have a final comment about this, because I know, Dallas, when you went and you looked at virtual fencing for the first time, as I read in one of your commentaries, you were a little skeptical. Like, where's this going? What's this really? Is this really a viable thing, or is this just people thinking this is kind of a easy way out mindset? So I want to go to you. We're kind of pulled off to the side, and as we wrap up our conversation here today, when we look at this, at the technology that we have in our industry as ranchers going forward in this, your thoughts?
Yeah, Justin, I think you're an idiot if you're not paying attention to this and curious about it. I would say go to see a neighbor's place that's doing it. Ask them what their experience has been. If you're going to be the rancher to get the next big lease, what tools do you need to have in your pocket to be effective walking into that lease? If you're looking at overlaying a carbon contract on your place, how are you going to fulfill that to show that you can put the best management on that place? So I think if we're not looking at how do we leverage these technologies to help us become better managers of land, better managers of our business, you're going to be left behind. So that'd be my comment to you is let's light a fire under your belly to be curious about these things and see how they can be applied to your business. Maybe you're not ready to pull the trigger. It's a big cost commitment, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I look at doing this for our place, it's more than double what we pay a hired man for the 5-month grazing period to come on there and help us out. That's a huge deal for us, right?
Yeah.
But the consideration I'm looking for in the future is, okay, what's the next step for our business, right? How does this position us? So that'd be my comments to you. What would be your comments to me?
Dallas, I think it would be this. If your ranch is in operation today, and what's it going to look like in 50 years? If you want it to be in existence in 20 and even 50 years out, what do you think that's going to look like? Do you think it's going to be doing exactly what we've been doing here today? I mean, it's not the fact that we're not raising cattle. That's not the point. We get that. But as far as how we've adapted to the different technologies, do you think it's going to look the same as it does today? It won't. It's just not going to. And if you're going to adapt, and if you're going to try to improve your gross margin that you talked about a little bit ago, you're going to have to look at some technology. You're going to have to look at ways you can reduce overhead. You're going to have to look at ways that you can improve your direct cost, your direct cost on your enterprises. So to me, it's about that. If you want to be around in 20 and 50 years, you're going to have to be open to adapting to some of the technology. That would be my answer back.
Yep.
So,
cool.
All right, Theo, Dallas, great conversation. Appreciate you guys being here. Theo, thank you for being here.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
You bet. Dallas, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
All right. Well, a great discussion here today that wraps up a longer conversation. As I said earlier, this was 2 episodes that we covered this conversation. I don't really like to do that, but it was such a long conversation when we sat down and had the interview that there wasn't really anything I wanted to cut out, because I had a lot of questions. I felt there were questions that probably a lot of you would have as well. I know we didn't get everything covered, but do go back, listen to last week's episode, because it does set the stage for some of the things that we talked about here today, and does hit some very relevant points and questions that we would have as ranchers. And then, of course, today as we wrap that up. Now, if you still have more questions, want to find out more things, really all of the virtual fencing companies have great websites. Do go to Halter's website. HalterHQ.com is their website where you can get more information from them as well. I appreciate Theo Beaumont with Halter joining us here on the program today, as well as Dallas Mount with Ranch Management Consultants. Stick around. We still have a lot to cover here on this week's edition of the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Molly Manufacturing is the industry standard in livestock handling equipment. The silencer hydraulic squeeze chute is safer for animals and the operator and is designed with special features that make the job of working livestock more efficient. Proudly made in the USA, every piece of Molly equipment is made to order for your operation. Safer and built to last, silencer from Molly is better by design. Find out more at mollymfg.com.
And joining us here now on the Working Ranch Radio Show is Tim Marlette, Rick Marlette with TK Angus. They are out of Valentine, Nebraska. Guys, good to have you here on the Working Ranch Radio Show today.
Glad to be here. Yeah, thanks for having us, Justin.
Well, as we were talking before we started here today, we brought up a subject in a conversation that I have referenced several times in talking with different folks in regard to our show. And of course, a lot of times, and when I'm talking about things, I'm always reverting back to how do we, as ranching operations, be profitable in what we do. And a lot of that comes down to, of course, the cow that we have out there on the place. As we were talking, we really referenced back to the point of getting cattle in our operations that fit our environment. There's so much going on out there where we got cattle that are, for lack of better words, being subsidized, okay? And because they're naturally maybe not on their own. And that's one of the things I know you guys really focus on is getting cattle for that environment.
Justin, we're a mom and pop operation. It's Tim and Kim Marlette for TK Angus, son Rick and Jen, and daughter Jen. Our sole income is off of these cows. And so those cows need to work for us to make a living. And that being said, we require the cows to do some things that I think fit within our environment. We live in the Sand Hills, Nebraska, in Cherry County. This is cow country in our thoughts anyway, but cows need to be able to work for us. We have some requirements, one of which we only have a 45-day calving window. If they don't fit within our calving window, we let somebody else own the cows.
And I think to piggyback off of that, the Sand Hills, you drive through anybody that's drove through the Sand Hills, we have, on a good year, have lots of grass out in the hills, but that forage is maybe not of a high quality, doesn't have a ton of punch to it. And so because of that, phenotypically, we like cattle that have lots of body and mass, that have the ability to go out there, travel good distance, and go chase down some of that poor quality grass. And they have to be able to put away enough of that poor quality grass to get the nutrient requirements that they've got or that they need to hit. And so we run our cows a lot like a commercial operation in that they have to go out and work for a living.
One of the things as we were talking, in fact, you guys just come in from breeding cattle here this morning. And as I was talking, Tim, with you earlier, when we were setting our conversation up here today, you said, well, we still naturally breed these animals. And as we talk about kind of how you guys do that, it's definitely not a slight towards the folks that choose to synchronize up and do things that way. But you guys have felt like as you're in a position where you're selling animals, that you have to know that these animals are going to be, that these genetics are capable and have a lot of fertility naturally without anything else added on there. And that's something that's really been a focus in your operation as well.
Right. And, our program, we're a fall-based calving operation. And part of it was just a little bit born out of necessity. But over time, as we have done this, we've realized, just looking at our preg rates, we're actually have been naturally selecting for some higher fertility because we aren't propping up maybe some of those first calf heifers or some of those bred heifers, previously with the synchronization protocol might have fired off a heat and got her bred the first time, whereas naturally she was maybe not going to do that. And so then we're compounding the problem. If that heifer has a heifer calf, here we're multiple generations into propping up maybe some fertility issues that wouldn't have been there had we not messed with Mother Nature, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the element of that is we know in our cattle business, longevity is one of the biggest I feel, one of the biggest profit takers in our industry. And longevity comes back to, are those cattle going to breed back? Are they going to be sound? Those kinds of things that really, from the standpoint of EPDs, we don't always have some of that kind of information. So when we can buy from a program that's been focusing on that, I think that's, when you said originally that you're focusing on the commercial cattlemen, that's kind of what that gets back to, doesn't it?
Justin, I don't think you could have said that any better. We need to look at cattle. We need to be able to study cattle, that not everything that we get off of a computer is true to what is reality. And for longevity, I think the first one is just feet and function and structural correctness. If they can't walk and survive, they're just not going to be here.
Yeah.
And if that compounds itself, if they can't walk, if they can't get bred, like you're saying, it's all tied together, and all of that ultimately impacts the bottom line as a commercial producer. They have to have cattle that are sound, functional, and can stick around for a long time and raise a calf every year.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the sale coming up. It's a 43rd bull and female production sale for TK Angus that's coming up. 43rd, I want to just emphasize that again, like you, Tim, when you started. This ain't just a fly-by-night, just startup operation. You guys have been doing this for quite some time. Coming up on the 15th of December there at the ranch at Valentine. Let's talk about what we have going on there. I know you've got, as you said, with the fall calving program, these bulls. Now, if you're going to use them, if you're in a fall calving program, of course, you could be using them as yearling bulls, but essentially, they're, for most of us that are spring calvers, these are going to be some good aged bulls, young aged bulls that are going to be ready to go. But let's talk about these bulls that you have in the offering there this year.
One of the things that you just hit on there, Justin, it makes sense though, but with us, with a long age bull that we're selling to ranchers to use in the spring, we don't have to push them the way that a lot of spring calving operations do. And I think that leads to the fertility and the function, the longevity of the bull customers and how those bulls work for them. It's a win-win deal.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I guess that's just a little bit different for what we do, we don't have very many sire groups. We try to keep our breeding program, A, simple, but B, we think from a consistency of product standpoint, we just don't utilize very many bulls. We take a lot of pride, and part of it is just, this is Dad and I's vacation, as we spend a lot of time on the road going to look at other cattle, maybe sourcing genetics through bulls or looking at, what the bulls that we utilize back out of our own program. But we find bulls that we want to use, and we really hang our hat and use those bulls heavily. And I think that lends itself to, if you start going through the catalog, there's an awful lot of 3/4, for sure half, 3/4 or more related bulls within a sire group, to where a guy that can come in and put together a lot of like genetics in a consistent package.
Mm-hmm. Tim?
I'm going to start off with one of the sires, and that's the Coleman Platinum Bull. And it's a bull that we sourced out of the Coleman herd in Montana. And we brought them in because of the females that they will produce. Longevity, fertility, feet, function. The cattle are probably going to, for those people that think maybe they've got cows a little bit too big for their environment, I think that these cattle offer an awful lot. Mm-hmm. We used the bull initially only on cows, but as we calved the first ones out, now we're using him mainly on heifers, and found him to work really well that way. But they're female makers.
Yeah.
We've also got a couple sire groups, I guess, for us. Want to be SAB Thrust, another good female making bull that just puts out lots of volume and mass. Also a bull called Flint Hills that we got sourced out of Kansas, and then a stellar grandson that we sourced out of South Dakota. So kind of hitting a little bit of everything as far as some calving ease genetics, but also good power, mass, performance type cattle, given within the caveat that they still fit our environment.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we do a little bit different too, Justin, we only sell the top half of the bulls, and we actually feed out the bottom half ourselves. With that being said, we like to get the carcass data back. This last year, our steers, they were 82% CAB or prime. And with that, we had a $268 per head premium as we're feeding them as NHTC cattle. So the cattle that we're producing will work in our environment. plus the work in the feedlot.
Also, I see on this you have some spring calving females for sale. Let's talk about those real quick.
So there's right at about 45 spring bred registered females. And this has been probably 4 or 5 years now in a row that we've sold spring bred females in our sale. This would be essentially a dispersal of any spring calving females that we have on the place. It's kind of look like a cross section of the herd. We've got from bred heifers up to the oldest cows are 7-year-old females. And one thing we really like to do with this is all of these females are bred for about the 1st of February calving date and bred to some of our up and coming sires. It gives us a way to get some of our newer sires out in the world, get the chance for multiple people to see some of these progeny and kind of help springboard some of these sires. Also gives them an opportunity to get in on some genetics that aren't necessarily readily available. One of the sires on the sale this year, service sires, is a bull called 2S Sharpie, and we've actually only offered semen a couple different times at an auction, kind of on a limited basis. And so there just isn't semen on the open market. So it's an opportunity for people to come in and purchase.
You'll be on the front end of what is a hot new bull. I think it's great.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I know you do have volume discounts. It's going to be on DV auction as well. That sale's 11:30 Central Time, where you're going to be starting with the females first, the bulls to follow around 1 o'clock lunch, the whole deal there at the ranch at Valentine, Nebraska. What is the website, Tim or Rick, either one of you, that folks can get to? I know you got the catalogs ready to go out. If folks want to get a catalog, want to see what you have online, what's the website?
Yeah, our website is tkangus.com. The catalog, sale order, when we get the sale order done, that will all be posted on there, as well as on DV Auction. Those that are more comfortable with DV Auction, the catalog. We should have videos posted up on DV Auction soon. That will have our contact information as well. And then also, we also have a Facebook page, TK Angus, where we're better at we're really good at getting chores done. We're maybe not always good at getting some of the marketing things done and getting the website updated, but I can at least get on Facebook on my phone real quick and, I forgot to do this and that on the website. But sometimes we're a little bit better about updating that Facebook page than we are the website.
Yeah. All right. Understood. So folks, again, go to the website because there's more sale details on that. I know there's some delivery options within 200 miles on free delivery, as well as the details for DV auction and other things. Guys, anything real quick before we head out?
Actually, it's 500 miles, Justin.
Oh, 500. Well, good.
We can go clear to Wyoming.
Okay. What are you saying? All right. Well, Tim, Rick, good to visit with you here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Justin.
You bet. And again, that was Tim and Rick Marlette with TK Angus. They are out of Valentine, Nebraska, but they can get bulls all across the country, no matter where you're at. So no matter what part of the country you're living in, if you want to find out more about their 43rd bull and female production sale coming up on the 15th of December, you can go to their website at tkangus.com. We'll be back with more after this.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the WeatherStationExperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit MeasureRain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to MeasureRain.com.
Out on the range, success starts with healthy, thriving cattle. And with long-range epinephrine extended-release dewormer, you're going to get up to 150 days of parasite protection in just one single dose, helping those cattle stay grazing, gaining weight without the extra parasite pressure. Bigger gains, stronger returns. It all starts with long range. Find out more at longrangedewormer.com. And as we turn now to our long range weather, standing by is meteorologist Don Day. And Don, I know you told us that winter was going to be coming, and definitely for several of us, we have finally found that winter has shown up.
Yeah, finally. It depends on kind of where you are, but there is a large part of the nation that really had a very warm, dry November. Now, there are exceptions. It was unusually wet in California, Arizona. The desert Southwest was wetter than the central and northern Rockies. Go figure, we have snowpack conditions in Arizona that are over 200% of normal, while we only have snowpacks that are 30 to 40% of normal in places like Montana and Wyoming and Idaho. So things have been a little bit upside down, but what has happened here recently is that finally the shift in the pattern that we've been looking at on a not just a local scale, not even a national scale, but a hemispheric scale that is altering the way things are working now and really getting winter started.
I know I asked you this same question last week, but now since winter has arrived, are we going to see it really lock in and be, in fact, right here today, it's been a little dark and gloomy and cold. And are we going to see that be extended, or are we going to see some patches in here where we'll have a little bit, maybe some sunny days, or at least a little bit of nicer weather without just a constant cold blast?
Yeah. Now, it looks to be that we're locked in a much more active pattern, meaning that we're going to see the frequency of storms and fronts increasing a lot as we go into the month of December. If you have a lot of systems moving through, that means you do have breaks where you're going to be able to have a day or two or three in between storm systems where the weather will improve, rebounding temperatures. You'll get to see that sun a little bit. But we see a very large pool of very cold air over Canada that will occasionally make forays into the lower 48. And we see this very strong cold pocket of air at times work its way out in the Eastern Pacific, causing the jet stream to be very strong. If that happens, it picks up Pacific moisture. And so the systems feeding into the United States will be robust. So the systems are going to be packing a punch because of the combination of the Arctic and the Pacific working together. So are we going to lock into bitter cold for days on end? No.
Mm-hmm. Now, Don, as you talk about the jet stream and the pattern that's going to take, where it enters the United States, of course, makes a really big difference. But where are we going to see the most severity of these colder temperatures?
Definitely the northern tier. We mentioned that the wet weather this fall had been in California and the desert Southwest. The Pacific was throwing systems in that part of the U.S. Now it's going to be more directed to the Pacific Northwest, the northern and central Rockies, into the upper Midwest. I think that if you go on a line from the far northwest corner of the Pacific Northwest through the central and northern Rockies into the northern and central plains, into the Great Lakes and New England, that's going to be the favorite storm path, at least for the month of December. I don't see it as wet and stormy in places like the desert Southwest and in at least central and southern California. So it's coming in at a different angle now.
Okay. So, Don, how are the southern plains looking since we're experiencing these cold temperatures? How far south is that going to reach into?
That's an area that's going to have some ups and downs because as these systems transit the northern part of the U.S., it will send cold surges down into the southern plains and the Gulf Coast region. That's going to keep them wet. That's going to keep part of the lower Mississippi and Missouri valleys in a fairly active pattern. But they're going to see the pendulum swing with temperatures probably the most because of what we're going to see. But if they do get these shots of colder air, they're not going to last too long.
All right. Well, Don, I know a lot of folks really watching the weather this time of the year, and so we appreciate the update. Look forward to talking to you next week.
Sounds good.
All right. And again, that was meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-range weather. If you want to tune in each and every morning to his daily video podcast, you can find the link to his YouTube channel by going to dayweather.com. Today's long-range weather brought to you by Long Range Cattle Dewormer. Find out more at longrangedewormer.com. Well, if you missed something here today, you want to go back and listen to it again, you can find all of our shows by going to our site at workingranchladio.com. Also, if you'd like to send me an email, maybe you have a question, idea for a show, comments, whatever that might be, my email address is justin.workingranch@gmail.com. The Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.